In Ljubljana we have 200,000 workplaces, and 63% of people come with a car to their place to work. How can you change this? What's the good practice on other cities?
Other cities? Well, certainly for people who are working in an area, they're taking up parking spaces that visitors and the shoppers and tourists, probably should have greater priority in using. And so there you need to use management techniques like time limits, so that it's not permitted to stay for longer than 4 hours, shorter parking periods, or making people pay per hour more if they stay longer. Because it's absolutely clear that certainly for commuters, that if those parking restrictions or parking management exists, then they will shift to other modes of transport. The first thing they'll probably try to do is to find a free parking space a little bit further out of town, and that does happen, and you have to maybe implement some other parking management measures, a lower price, a longer stay, but some kind of buffer area, if you like, between the area with higher prices and shorter stays and the area with no parking management at all. Certainly I think it's very important, especially in big cities like Ljubljana. Ljubljana is the economic motor of Slovenia. People are not going to stop coming to Ljubljana. Then it's perfectly reasonable to use, especially for commuters, some quite, if you like, stringent parking policies, so that the space that they were using for parking before can be given over to more useful things or more valuable things. So as I say, parking for shoppers, parking for tourists, but public space as well, wider footways, mini parks on the street, or parking for residents, because especially in the areas of Ljubljana where you have the tower blocks that were built in Yugoslav times, there is, I know, a real problem with parking, and so making sure that the residents who live there can park their car in that area so they can park close to their house and don't have to compete with commuters. That's really very important.
But what about the problem with not the best public transport as it is in Ljubljana? Doesn't it collide in some way?
How do you mean?
I mean, because you can't expect people to park, I don't know, 2 kilometers out of the city center and then use the public transport if there is no possibility to, I don't know, to get to the city in the next half an hour. They wait for the bus. If they have to change the buses 2-3 times.
But is that your perception that the public transport here in Ljubljana is really that poor?
It is common public perception.
It's a common public perception, yeah. Okay, so I think this is another thing that you need to do to make parking more user-friendly, is to say, well, is to communicate that the alternatives are actually pretty good, I mean, there is a park and ride here, I think it's called Dolgi Most, is that right? Yeah. So Dolgi Most, I believe the bus service is at least every 10 minutes, from Dolgi Most into town. Yeah. So, to me... So you think the public transport does not have the good PR here in Slovenia? I think a bit more positive PR for the public transport in Ljubljana would be very valuable, wrapped up as in part of the package of, there are things we've done to Ljubljana to make the public space better, to give some parking space, more parking space to residents. This means, okay, if you're working in Ljubljana, you might have to use alternatives like the park and ride. But look, the park and ride parking is free. I believe it is at Dolgi Most. The bus goes every 10 minutes. There's a new park and ride opened in the south, I believe, the south side of Ljubljana, and there's an existing park and ride at the north end as well. But as I was saying as well, there are other options. Drive some of the way in, find an on-street parking space that's free, and continue by bicycle. Why not?
Da meščani vidijo več problemov, kot jih je v resnici, je sicer nekaj povsem običajnega.
There isn't enough information about where parking is, what parking is, costs what. An example in my city where I come from in Scotland, it's Edinburgh. It is a larger city. I did some survey work. At the time there were 19 off-street public car parks in the city centre. We did the survey. The average number that people thought existed was 5. Right? So clearly there was a problem, basic lack of publicity. But even in smaller towns, parking demand is often concentrated in a very small area. The highest parking demand, the place where people say that they can't find a parking space, it's difficult to park. This can be 1 or 2 or 3 city centre streets, and you walk a few minutes away, and it's easy to find a space.
So we're too spoiled as users.
Well, I'm not saying you're spoiled. It's it's human nature, if you like, but something that can help there and help those small cities give them an image that it's not difficult to park in their cities is to say, well, yeah, okay, in this area there is high parking demand, but did you know that just round the corner there is, you only have to walk 3 minutes, then you can find a parking space no problem and at no cost and park for as long as you want. These messages are important in making especially town centres that are having problems competing with out-of-town shopping centres, making town centres giving the message that, yeah, you can get here, you can park.
Če bi torej vozniki bili sproti obveščeni o prostih parkirnih mestih, bi čas parkiranja lahko močno skrajšali. Vse več mest je zato svoje garažne hiše in celo parkirna mesta na ulicah povezalo z aplikacijami mobilnih telefonov in avtomobilskimi navigacijskimi napravami.
Is there any possibility that things go wrong, Dubrovnik?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that they went in Dubrovnik. They've installed sensors in the street around the old town, in the parking spaces around the old town. So they know who's using those spaces. They know which ones are empty at any one time, and they can link this, although they haven't yet, but they can link it to a real-time guidance system, which is fantastic. But I think it has to be seen in the context of their wider parking management policy, and a key aspect of that is that residents can park in these spaces for as long as they want. So this means that residents do park there for a long time, up to 6 months. In some cases, they've recorded cars that haven't moved for 6 months. And so the technology is not really assisting there. The technology has to be used in the context of what you're trying to achieve overall and in the context of your wider management policy. And if your wider management policy isn't working, then the technology isn't going to help. It would be possible indeed to reserve a space. I think what you'd have to expect is that you'd have to pay. If you wanted to reserve a space, of course you'd have to pay a higher price.
Nothing is free.
Nothing's free. Especially, let's not forget the fact that there's a big opportunity cost associated with this space. That means that you can do something else with this space. So if somebody wants a prime parking spot, right outside the key destination in Ljubljana, then they should, I think it's only fair on everybody else that they should expect to pay for that.
A square meter in the city demands its price, right?
Yeah,
even for the car.
Exactly. You know how much a square meter of land costs in the city, and you think about the other things that you can do with a square meter of land. I mean, we look at the way that the centre of Ljubljana has changed over the last 10 years, the pedestrianisation, and we see how successful that has been in Ljubljana. I'm not saying it would necessarily be successful everywhere, but in Ljubljana it's been incredibly successful. That land on the street that used to be for parking is now for people walking, and that's transformed the city centre economy, as I understand it, and indeed transformed Ljubljana's place in the world, because it's turned Ljubljana into an enormous tourist attraction with the advantages and disadvantages that go with that.
Is the autonomous drive going to save our parking problems, with the cars driving us to work and then going back home?
Yeah, well, this is one possibility, certainly. They're self-driving vehicles, as I prefer to call them. It's quite possible that people could do exactly as you said and get their self-driving vehicle to drop them off.
But isn't that called taxi?
Well, yes.
In some cities.
It is. It's a low-cost taxi. It's your own personal taxi with your own personal computer driving your taxi. I think what we have to be cautious about is how quickly this technology will actually be taken up by people, and that's a lot to do with how much they can afford it. Yeah, I doubt it's going to be any cheaper than a car now. If you buy your own car now, and we have to remember that in most northwest European countries, and in the US and Canada and Australia, we see decreasing car use by younger people and decreasing driving license ownership. And one of the reasons for this is that these people are moving back to live closer to city centres where they don't need parking, where they can walk and cycle and take public transport. And I think we haven't done enough research yet to understand whether that trend would continue or whether self-driving vehicles would reverse that trend, and whether those people will acquire a self-driving vehicle and live a long way away from where they work, or want to go and use the vehicle to drop them off and pick them up again, thus saving or solving parking problems locally, but generating a lot more vehicle kilometres.